coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It's good to be with you. We thank you for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we're watching right now. Shifting explanations, an evolving cast of who knew what, and fights over the FBI's mandate to investigate. The latest on what's in those several boxes of documents taken from former President Trump's private residence. Plus, after a series of threats against politicians and law enforcement agents, a new warning from the director of the FBI. What we know about some of the common threads behind recent attacks. And South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham will be forced to appear in front of a Georgia grand jury after losing an appeal. What the investigation is about, and the latest on Rudy Giuliani as a target of a criminal investigation in the same state. And later this hour, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney says she knew her votes related to January 6th could come at the cost of her job. Now she's just more than 24 hours from finding out if that's the case. Our own Robert Costa, live in Wyoming, following the race. Plus, after a stroke and a pacemaker just ahead of the election left him hospitalized, Pennsylvania Senate hopeful John Fetterman is back out on the campaign trail. Why he's now being more candid about his health scares and how voters are reacting to it. But we begin tonight in Georgia, where former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani is now considered a target of a criminal investigation, as a Fulton County grand jury investigates efforts of the former president and his supporters to overturn the 2020 election. Giuliani's lawyer confirmed this to CBS News as his client is scheduled to appear before a special grand jury Wednesday. Giuliani was among Trump's closest confidants and appeared before the Georgia State Senate in December 2020, in which he made unfounded claims of misconduct among state officials. Meanwhile, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is being ordered to testify before a grand jury in Georgia, the grand jury investigating former President Trump's actions after the 2020 election. Graham's office said today he will appeal that ruling. For more on this and all the day's top political stories, Ed O'Keefe and David Drucker join us now. Ed is CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent, and David is senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Ed, let's start with you. Despite all the noise around this, the investigations related to the 2020 election are very much marching forward, if not accelerating. What's happened in the past few hours, and what are the latest developments from the Department of Justice about Mar-a-Lago and about Georgia?
Yeah, and not only that, but then, of course, January 6th, there's a handful of things. So strap in here, folks. Let's start with this. The Justice Department this afternoon responding to legal moves by media organizations seeking to unseal the affidavit that led to the Mar-a-Lago search by the FBI. Responding a short time ago, the Justice Department did, saying they don't want it released because, quote, disclosure of the government's affidavit at this stage would likely chill future cooperation by witnesses whose assistance may be sought as this investigation progresses. They add later that the fact that there is highly classified materials further underscores the need to protect the integrity of the investigation. So in other words, the Justice Department asking the judge, don't unseal it. There's some other documents related to it the media is happy to have, they said, but otherwise there's too much sensitive info in there. Beyond that, let's go down to the state of Georgia, as you mentioned, where you mentioned Lindsey Graham being told by a federal judge today he's going to have to testify to a grand jury that is investigating alleged election interference in the wake of the 2020 results. Remember, the senator had called Georgia officials at the request of the former president to try to find out how their system worked. At least that's what he says. He asked the federal judge to toss it. The federal judge said, just because you're a senator doesn't mean you don't have to testify. You're going to have to testify, but he's now appealing. Separate of that, a lawyer for former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani tells CBS News that Giuliani now is the subject of a criminal investigation related to all this. He will be in Georgia on Wednesday to appear in some stuff that they've been trying to put off, his attorneys have. But now, because he's the subject of a criminal investigation, the lawyer says they'll be showing up. Beyond that, going back to the Mar-a-Lago matter, for example, on the political front, CBS News was first to report that now members of the House Judiciary Committee, Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee, are asking 3 top Biden administration officials to preserve all their records and communications regarding the Mar-a-Lago search warrant. They're asking Attorney General Merrick Garland, the FBI Director Chris Wray, and the White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain to preserve all communications they had about the lead-up to that investigation. Important to point out, the White House has repeatedly said they did not have any heads-up, that they learned about it, as we did, through the news media and through the former president's statement. There is a long-standing Biden administration policy that divorces and keeps separate most West Wing officials from Justice Department officials, and there are loops they have to jump through in order to not loops, in order to communicate with anybody at the Justice Department on any matter, specifically to avoid any suggestion of politics or interference, and in anticipation of these kinds of congressional requests. The ones from the Judiciary Committee, the Republican members signal they believe they'll have control of Congress next year, and this will be a top issue of congressional oversight.
So all these threads, all of this happening simultaneously, David, the question is, who is the former president going to confide in and meet with? Who is the inner circle now for him?
Well, look, I think he keeps the same couple of people in his inner circle that he consults with. That usually are his children, his son-in-law, a couple of top strategists. But ultimately, Donald Trump keeps his own counsel. And often he is bobbing and weaving and throwing spaghetti at the wall here, and there's not some greater strategy. He takes many of his cues, in fact, from the Republican base, even though it seems like he leads them along so often. He kind of checks in with them, sees where they are on a particular matter, and if he likes what he hears, he runs with it. That's exactly what he's been doing in regard to his reaction to the FBI search of his residence and social club, Mar-a-Lago. The base was up in an uproar about it, and so is Donald Trump.
Ed, in the meantime, there's another Republican in Florida of some notoriety. There's Governor Ron DeSantis, and there's been this talk about a chill in the relationship between Trump and DeSantis. Yet, Ron DeSantis was there in Arizona this weekend supporting two Trump-backed candidates. So what did he have to say in Trump's defense?
Well, he certainly had something to say, and it's notable that Ron DeSantis is now traveling outside his state with just about a week to go until his own primary, in which he's uncontested. But he's now starting to use his own political capital to help other Republicans and to help former President Trump. Take a listen to what he said.
These agencies have now been weaponized to be used against people that the government doesn't like. And you look at Hillary's house in Chappaqua when she had a rogue server and she was laundering classified information. I don't remember them doing that. I do remember them manufacturing a false conspiracy theory about Russia collusion.
So even if there is a rift of some kind, he's certainly out there publicly defending the former president against what the FBI did last week and suggesting that he's being unfairly targeted. He may be doing that for crass political reasons because he knows that in order to win a Republican primary, you got to win the base. And right now, the base is with the former president. But either way, he's out there providing some public defense, as are most other leading Republicans. And pointing out there, we should point out that he's at an event that is sponsored by this Turning Point Action Group, essentially a group of younger Republicans, more conservative folks, and he'll be doing similar visits later this week to Pennsylvania and Ohio for Senate and gubernatorial candidates in those states. So interesting to see him out there, and interesting to see him out there with a third party, essentially, or a separate organization in the Republican sphere who's helping sponsor these events and pay for them so that the candidates themselves don't have to cover those costs. And an example, again, of how Republicans are rallying around the former president. Whether that's good long-term politics remains to be seen, but in the short term, they understand they got to do it.
So, David, you hear Governor DeSantis pushing back against the FBI. Is any of this drama around the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago becoming part of the Republican midterm message?
Well, for the time being, it is, and I think you're going to hear a lot about this from Republicans in the weeks ahead. And of course, then at some point, the extended August recess for Congress will come to an end. They'll all flood back into D.C. And I'm sure a lot of Republicans will put their faces in front of cameras and say what a travesty it is that a search warrant was executed at Mar-a-Lago. I think Republicans are going to want to be careful about this only in this regard. As long as they are talking about skyrocketing inflation, rising crime rates, and other issues that are really important to a broad spectrum of voters, Democrats, Republicans, and independents in particular, they're in a really good place because they can point fingers at President Joe Biden. Democrats control both the House and Senate, not by governing majorities, but voters don't really make those distinctions. And they can say things have not been great. We're in a recession. There are layoffs. Put us in charge of at least one chamber of Congress, if not both, and we can work with the president to moderate his policies and balance things out, at least put the brake pedals on the things you don't like that you're getting from Democrats. That's a really good message for them in the home stretch of the campaign. if they get too wrapped up in talking about Trump's issues with the FBI and all of the things Trump wants to talk about, it's going to hurt them in some of these swing seats. We may still see a Republican wave. They may still win a lot of these races, but they reduce their chances, of extending the map and winning bigger governing majorities that they're after. So I think that they can do this for, a few days, a week or two. They've got to get their core message back to the economy and these kitchen table issues that have worked so well for them.
Yeah, it reminds me of what we saw so frequently in the past 6 years, where the Trump story of the day blocks out the message for both parties, and they're both trying to cut through. And at this moment, it's difficult to do so. So with that antecedent, Ed, what is the current president up to in the coming weeks, and how's the White House trying to handle all these questions about his political future?
Well, he's on vacation right now, and they're perfectly fine keeping him out of the news because they'd all like to take some time off, or at least Lilo as well. But he is coming back from the first part of his vacation tomorrow in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. Stop at the White House for a few hours to officially sign the Inflation Reduction Act, that big piece of Democratic passed legislation last week having to do with climate change, health care, and taxes on big corporations and the wealthy. They'll hold a bigger, broader, more politically themed campaign rally-style event on the day after Labor Day to celebrate it in a bigger way when more Americans are also not on vacation and maybe starting to pay attention to the elections. But he'll make it official tomorrow and go back on to vacation in Wilmington and Rehoboth Beach. After that, though, dozens of stops in more than 20 states by cabinet secretaries, the vice president, and the president to sell the climate and health care bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, the gun and mental health bill passed earlier this year, the CHIPS Act, that one that helps buoy the semiconductor industry, even the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed last year. They believe all of that combined is a demonstration of big, important work by Democrats on behalf of Americans and something they can go to voters with and say, look, despite the 50-50 divide, we got some big things done, and we did most of it without Republican help. Give us back control of Congress next year.
Ed O'Keefe, David Drucker, thank you both.
Take care.
Thank you.
The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are warning of increased threats to government officials and law enforcement following the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home last week. The FBI and DHS released a memo to law enforcement nationwide Friday saying they, quote, have observed an increase in violent threats posted on social media against federal officials and facilities, including a threat to place a so-called dirty bomb in front of FBI headquarters and issuing general calls for civil war and armed rebellion. For more on this, Nicole Skanga joins us now. She's CBS News' Homeland Security and Justice reporter. Nicole, we appreciate the time. You've been reporting on this story extensively, quite well. What more can you tell us about the bulletin and some of the specific threats it mentioned?
Well, thank you so much, Scott. Good to be with you. Now, that bulletin went out to state and local law enforcement partners late Friday night, early Saturday morning, around 12:45 a.m. And senior law enforcement officials that I speak with said the impetus behind pushing out that threat bulletin was, in fact, the specificity of some of the calls to violence they were seeing online. What you referenced earlier, that dirty bomb, that threat of a improvised explosive before FBI headquarters. It was threats like that that convinced law enforcement to send out that alert to law enforcement agencies nationwide across the country. I do want to read part of this bulletin from DHS and FBI to our viewers that says, quote, multiple articulated threats and calls for the targeted killing of judicial, law enforcement, and government officials associated with the Palm Beach search. Of course, that's in reference to the FBI's authorized search of the former president's Mar-a-Lago home. I am standing just miles away from that estate. And those threats also, according to the bulletin, included the judge who approved the search warrant. In fact, there was so much concern regarding that judicial official that their biography was removed from the website of the U.S. District Court, Southern District of Florida. And beyond that, threats not only to officials but family members, including, quote, personal identifying information of possible targets of violence, home addresses, identification of who in the family was close to those officials, disseminated online on both encrypted and some open social media platforms.
What do we know, Nicole, about that suspect who attempted to breach the FBI offices in Cincinnati, and what are we getting from the social media footprint, which is always so valuable for investigators?
Yeah, so just hours before 42-year-old Ricky Schiffer did in fact have that standoff with law enforcement outside of FBI's Cincinnati field office, he took to social media. Truth Social, which is actually the social media platform pushed out by the former president's media company. And it was there that he first expressed his desire to, quote, kill FBI agents. He even confirmed his attack, or at least appeared to confirm his attack after the fact, writing, quote, if you don't hear from me, it is true. I tried attacking the FBI, urging others on the platform to get ready for combat following the FBI's authorized search of Mar-a-Lago. We do know that Schiffer, in addition to being a veteran and also a former member of the Florida National Guard, was in or around Washington, D.C. During the Capitol insurrection on January 6, 2021. He was not arrested at that time, according to senior law enforcement officials, but he is believed to have been in Washington, D.C. And speaking with senior law enforcement officers today, what is concerning about this in particular is, you know, he was a resident of Columbus going to what was seemingly a local federal law enforcement outpost. And the concern here, not only about hard targets within Washington, D.C., like the U.S. Capitol, but also law enforcement throughout the country, police departments throughout the country. One official telling me when someone radicalizes to attack law enforcement, they don't have to go very far to find those officers.
Well, let's look at the big picture then. What can be done moving forward to stop threats like this?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are 18,000 law enforcement agencies nationwide. And what we're hearing right now from federal law enforcement is that even some of these large police departments like New York City, Houston, even in South Florida, Miami, not too far away from where I am now, there are only a handful, maybe 2 to 5 officers as part of those larger police departments that are dedicated to scouring social media for specific credible threats of violence, and that is just not enough. That enables law enforcement to be reactive to some of those online threats, but not proactive. So they are relying on the tips of individuals, the tips that come from social media companies like the likes of Twitter, Meta, etc., in order to go out and suss out the threat. And that is why in so many of these cases of radicalized violence, domestic violent extremists we've seen recently, it's only after the fact that we say there were so many red flags online. What happened? I'm hearing that the resources are just not there. And so also hearing from state and local officials, police departments that say they need the funding in order to take advantage of some of the new federal programs that are being pushed out to train some law enforcement officers on how to really detect and track threats online. In addition to that, a call to the general public to be aware of threats online and to report them not only to social media companies, but also to local and federal law enforcement. And some of the indicators that I've heard from senior law enforcement officials today, individuals who have concrete plans for violent action, amassing of weapons, and of course, saying they're not coming back or issuing goodbyes to family and friends. If any of those sound familiar, law enforcement telling CBS News they want the public to report those kinds of threats.
That's good advice. In West Palm Beach, Florida, Nicole Skanga, we thank you.
Thank you.
One of former President Trump's most vocal Republican critics is fighting for her political life. What Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney is saying about tomorrow's primary and what she told our own Robert Costa about her possible political future. He's live on the ground in Jackson, Wyoming with all the latest next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white? A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before. That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney is fighting to hold on to her seat as voters head to the polls in Wyoming for the primary Tuesday. The January 6 committee members facing off against trial attorney Harriet Hageman, who is backed by former President Trump. Despite Cheney raising more than $15 million for the bid, she is far behind in recent polls. She trails Hageman by nearly 30 points in a recent poll conducted by the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center at the University of Wyoming. Cheney was ousted from her leadership position in the U.S. House after publicly disagreeing with top Republicans about Mr. Trump following January 6th.
Do you believe President Trump should be speaking, or former President Trump should be speaking at CPAC this weekend?
Yes, he should.
Congresswoman Cheney?
That's up to CPAC. I've been clear in my views about President Trump and the extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party or the country.
On that high note.
So, quite a primary day ahead in Wyoming. For more on that, let's go to Wyoming. Robert Costa's there, and Finn Gomez joins us too. Robert is CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent. Finn is CBS News political director. All right, Bob, what is your latest reporting? You're on the ground now in Wyoming. What are you hearing?
Good to be with you, Scott and Finn. Here in Jackson, Wyoming, you have a bit of an enclave of some moderate Republicans and Democrats. In the final days of this campaign, Congresswoman Cheney is trying to encourage Democrats to cross the political line and to become Republicans so they can vote in this primary and give her a shot. But it's very much an uphill challenge. Talking to voters here in Jackson, there's a sense that even though the Cheney political dynasty in the state goes back decades, her father represented Wyoming in the House from 1979 to 1989, that this is a very tough race for her because, as someone just put it to me, a voter, a few minutes ago, the state has taken a two-step to the right, and it's very much a Trump state.
Well, we see what this would mean for Ms. Cheney.
This is a moment that's a reckoning for the Republican Party. One of their major names, someone from the Cheney family, has gotten prominence by going after the former Republican president in an investigative way on Capitol Hill, vice chair of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack. But because of that effort, she now faces, her political future is on the line. She faces a crucible politically here in Wyoming on Tuesday. But it could set her up, if she loses, for something that doesn't usually happen to a candidate when they're defeated in a House race, which is a national run, a presidential run. She has a lot of money in the bank, as you detailed. She's raised over $13 million, at least $14 million. And that leaves her in a position with a national fundraising base and national support from the anti-Trump wing of the Republican Party. Would it be enough to win the nomination? Who knows? At this point, be an uphill climb there as well. But that's the kind of thing she's looking at based on my conversations with her allies.
Based on what you're hearing, does she have aspirations of doing this? Even if she has a national fundraising base, which is critical, does she actually want to do it?
She hasn't ruled it out, Scott. She sat down with me a few months ago before the hearings began on Capitol Hill, and she said she's not ruling out anything in her future, whether it's a run for higher office or something else. And this is someone who believes the Republican Party has taken a turn toward Trump. And she believes, her father has said this and echoed it in an ad, that Trump is a threat to democracy. And that is the crossroads for this party right now. Do they want to go in the Cheney direction that questions Trump, questions staying aligned with Trump or not? At least here in Wyoming, polling shows they want to stick with Trump, not with the Congresswoman. But that doesn't mean the whole Republican debate is going to be finished tomorrow night.
I got a big name on the ballot in Alaska tomorrow, too. Finn, what's the latest on former Governor Sarah Palin's attempt to make a political comeback and win a seat in the House?
Scott, that's right. Former Governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, is running in a three-way race to fill Alaska's vacant House seat. She's running against fellow Republican Nick Begich, a Republican businessman who has the backing of the Alaska GOP establishment. Palin was endorsed by Donald Trump. She's also running against Democrat Mary Peltola in this special election, in this ranked tier system of voting. This is the first time that she has campaigned, she's been running since she and John McCain lost to former President Barack Obama and current President Joe Biden in the 2008 presidential race. The seat was actually previously occupied by Congressman Don Young, who was actually the longest-serving Republican in congressional history and who passed away in March. But Scott, whoever wins in Tuesday's special election will only hold a seat for a few months, and then will face the voters again at the normal November general election. Officials say it could take days or even weeks until the election results are determined, but it is a key race here in Alaska tomorrow.
We remember 12 years ago in the primary when Lisa Murkowski couldn't secure her party's nomination for Senate, won the Senate seat anyhow through write-ins. What's her prospect for tomorrow in her primary?
Well, Alaska primary has a unique system, which I just mentioned, which is this ranked choice voting, where the top 4 candidates out of the 19 that are currently running for this seat will advance to the general. However, it's really this race is really between the 2 Republican frontrunners, Kelly Tshibaka, who was endorsed by Donald Trump, and moderate incumbent Senator Lisa Murkowski. Murkowski is also that rare Senate swing vote, and also one of the 7 Senate Republicans who voted to impeach Trump over the January 6th attack. Tshibaka has expressed skepticism about the 2020 election, one of the election deniers, even though she considers Joe Biden the legitimate president, and again has that strong backing from President Trump. Alaska's election rules will also likely help Murkowski by letting some Democrats choose her as her second choice, boosting the incumbent above the far-right challenger in Kelly Tshibaka. But it's an interesting race as well, and of course, with the Senate balance in November, it could impact that. And can I just say, Scott, I'd much rather be where Bob is in Wyoming, even though I love my colleagues here. That is just a beautiful live shot location.
I got to tell you, for 2 of the least populous states, 2 really interesting primary days ahead. Bob Costa's in the beautiful mountains of Wyoming. I think we all would agree Finn Gomez is in a very beautiful newsroom
I am.
Here in Washington, within sight of my sightly desk, which is nice. Thank you both, and good luck tomorrow.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
A federal judge is denying Senator Lindsey Graham's attempt to dodge a Georgia grand jury subpoena in Georgia's investigation into the 2020 presidential election. Why the South Carolina Republicans' motion to quash a subpoena was denied, and why a special grand jury wants to hear from him. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland. Here's a look at some of our top stories. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security are warning about an increase in threats directed at law enforcement. The Joint Bulletin specifically cited an incident in Cincinnati last week when an armed man tried to infiltrate an FBI office there. Plus, the State Department has confirmed the U.S. is engaging with Syrian leaders in an attempt to bring home Austin Tice. The journalist disappeared 10 years ago and was last seen in a Damascus suburb. Federal authorities have said he's being held by the Syrian government. It was never confirmed nor denied that. And Republican lawmakers want the Justice Department, the FBI, and members of the Biden administration investigated over the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. The Justice Department said today they will not release the details in the affidavit, arguing why that raid was necessary. Prosecutors have told lawyers for Rudy Giuliani he's the target of a Georgia criminal investigation into attempts to interfere in the 2020 election in the state. The former personal attorney to former President Trump is scheduled to testify Wednesday. Giuliani led efforts to keep Mr. Trump in power after the election. A federal judge has also denied South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham's attempt to quash a subpoena in the same investigation. Graham's lawyers argue the Constitution shields him from having to testify about legislative business. The judge rejected that argument. The senator is now set to testify next week. For more on all this, Tamar Hullerman joins us now, senior reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tamar, we appreciate your time on what's a very busy day in this story. So what can you tell us about why Giuliani might be a target of the investigation?
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. And there's several incidents involving Rudy Giuliani here in Georgia that the special grand jury is looking into. Of course, starting with several appearances that he made at the Georgia State House in late 2020 as the presidential results were being disputed. He spewed off a bunch of conspiracy theories, falsehoods, half-truths about the situation in Georgia. And he also aired a very selectively edited surveillance video of vote counting in State Farm Marina, which he said was a smoking gun for fraud. Our authorities here almost immediately disputed what he was saying there, but still he continued to echo those falsehoods. And we know that the special grand jury is interested in that. National reporting has showed that Mr. Giuliani was also at the center of efforts to appoint a slate of fake Republican electors in Georgia and several swing states. And he also apparently called some officials in Georgia, including our Speaker of the House here in Georgia. So several incidents he's involved in.
Let's move on to Senator Graham. Why did the judge deny this attempt to get him out of his subpoena?
Well, there's several reasons that she cited in her order this morning. The first is that basically this legislative privilege that he was citing. His attorneys were arguing that the speech or debate clause in the Constitution basically barred prosecutors in the grand jury from asking him anything about these 2 phone calls that he placed to the Georgia Secretary of State's office. His lawyer said this all fell within the purview of his role as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and because he's a member of Congress who was tasked with certifying the presidential election results. But the judge said, no, there's many activities here that could be kind of more constituted as political activity rather than kind of a straight up legislative one that would be immune from testimony. She also denied that he was a high ranking official that basically would allow him to quash his subpoena. She said he had to come testify, although the senator mentioned he plans to appeal the decision, and we could see something from the 11th Circuit very soon.
It would have to be very soon because it's got that short turnaround time, right? Did they move with that type of expeditious nature they're going to need to move to get that appeal heard before the subpoena or the testimony date?
Absolutely. And we could see a judge say, hey, let's hold his testimony before the special grand jury until we're able to move. But you're absolutely right, Scott. August 23rd was the date on his subpoena. And, the district court judge moved very expeditiously with this. And I'm expecting the 11th Circuit to do the same.
Where does this stand overall? We see all these pieces and these specks of the investigation, from Giuliani today to Graham possibly next week. Big picture, where is this thing?
I mean, it's appearing that this investigation is moving kind of closer and closer to Donald Trump. I like to kind of describe it as a pyramid. And the investigation has been kind of slowly working its way up. And the fact that we're getting to folks like Rudy Giuliani, the former president's personal attorney, to a confidant like Lindsey Graham shows that we're getting very close to the former president. One thing, as far as we know that this investigation haven't gotten to, as far as we know, they have not subpoenaed former members of the Trump White House. They haven't subpoenaed the former president himself yet. But those are options that the district attorney, Fani Willis, has mentioned are not off the table for her. And it'll be interesting to see how close she wants to get to the former president. He, of course, has many types of privilege that he will likely try and cite, including a presidential immunity. And, she would have a giant legal fight on her hands, especially should he announce, as many are expecting, his 2024 presidential run. That will instantly complicate matters, and it's something that undoubtedly the Fulton DA has to be thinking about at this point.
Just a piece of housekeeping. We hear about these subpoenas in this investigation because in Georgia, in Fulton County, they have to make public an out-of-state subpoena?
Yeah, there's a special process that you need to go through if you're subpoenaing somebody who lives outside of Georgia. Basically, you have to go in front of a judge in the home state of wherever these out-of-state witnesses live to kind of convince them that these witnesses are kind of necessary and material for the investigation. And so that's where we see the kind of public leaking of these subpoenas. And in the next couple of days, we're going to see hearings for a number of former Trump campaign attorneys, including John Eastman, the former law professor who's considered the legal architect behind the fake elector scheme, Jenna Ellis, who worked with Rudy Giuliani, and others as well. And so there's definitely a lot of updates these last couple of weeks, and we're only expecting this to heat up in the weeks and months ahead.
It's a big case. It's a big story to keep yourself abreast of, and you're doing a great job. Tamar Hellerman, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
China is announcing more military drills near Taiwan after a new U.S. congressional delegation visited the island Monday. Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey led the group of lawmakers. They arrived Sunday and met with Taiwan's president. The trip comes nearly 2 weeks after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the island. Pelosi's trip prompted military exercises for Beijing in retaliation. Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor and Democratic Senate hopeful John Fetterman is now admitting he was close to death just days before winning a primary back in May. What he's saying about his physical fitness for office and how he's campaigning against the Trump-backed TV doctor Mehmet Oz. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Pennsylvania Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman is rebooting his in-person campaigning after resting for several months following a stroke in May. During a campaign event Friday night, the lieutenant governor offered more details about his recent health scares and defeating Republican Mehmet Oz in November.
3 months ago, I may not have made it, but now I'm standing right here in Erie. You are going to deliver for us in November, and that will deliver Pennsylvania for us, and I will deliver the 51st vote in the Senate.
CBS News reporter Sarah Ewald-Weiss is with me now. You were covering this event, covering Pennsylvania's campaigns. Did John Fetterman give any explanation for why he waited so long to give this more candid assessment of his health?
You know, he did not explain why it took him so long to get into the details of his health. He gave an interview over the summer to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. That was a print interview. And then the day before the campaign rally that he had on Friday, he gave his first TV interview since having that stroke in May. And he did talk a little bit more in the TV interview about his health. He said his doctors believe he will get 100% back to normal and he'll fully recover. The other thing he did mention is he still has some audio issues. He still sometimes misses a word or mushes a few words together. That was what he said about his lingering side effects from the stroke. And they said that he would fully recover, and it's getting better and better every day. But, you know, there are questions about his health. He did have a serious stroke. They did put in a pacemaker. Now he's about to get back on the campaign trail for one of the most important races we will see in this midterm. Pennsylvania is a battleground state. It is a state that Democrats, of which Fetterman want to pick up for the Senate in a split Senate. So it'll be interesting to see how things move forward. But he seemed very happy to be back out on the trail. He seemed very energized to be back on the trail. And despite a few times where maybe he was missing a word here and there, it was very hard to see that he was having any troubles at the rally itself.
He's talking about his health issues, but what issues was he talking about, and what do the polls show?
You know, it's interesting. Despite being off the campaign trail for 3 months, he has been leading in the most recent polls, and some of them by quite a bit. One Fox News poll last month had him ahead of Oz by 11 points. And he's been doing a lot of campaigning online. He's been engaging with his supporters on social media. He had paid advertising. But, you know, one of the things that he really focused on is just being the everyday man. That is really the persona he is taking on, how he's trying to campaign here. Some of the issues he's specifically focusing on, as he's talked about at his rally, raising the minimum wage, being very pro-union. He talked specifically about Roe versus Wade, the protection of the right to an abortion. He also specifically talked about a few other things, but he kept his comments at the rally specifically on the issues very brief. He spoke mostly about his health. That's what he talked about at the top. He took aim and poked some fun at Dr. Oz, his opponent, but he kept really short on the issues specifically at this rally. But we'll see how this moves forward, what he has to say. He did also talk about, I will say, about abolishing the filibuster. That was one point he made at the rally as well.
Well, he has represented this progressive wing of the Democratic Party. How does he make inroads to moderates in a narrow margin state like Pennsylvania?
You know, I really think he is just trying to run an authentic campaign to who he is, what he supports. It doesn't seem like he's really trying to reach across the aisle so much as just say what he specifically stands for. And it's interesting. It seems like he could end up picking up support from across the aisle, or specifically from Republican voters. I was at this event in Erie. There was a long line to get into the event, and I was taken aback, actually, when I was approaching voters, and several people who were standing in that line to see John Fetterman speak were actually registered Republicans, they said, and they were there because they supported him and they were going to vote for him in November. And you know what? This is something that Democrats, they see him maybe as a progressive, but the Democrats only have 50 votes right now in the Senate. They need 51. And so I think that if Democrats can rally and get the enthusiasm they need, it won't be so much moderate versus centrist versus progressive. It'll be more, we need the Democrat in office moving forward for the party.
Let's talk about the Republican nominee, Mehmet Oz. How's his campaign schedule shaping up, and is he still pushing that Trump endorsement on the stump?
You know what? While he was out, while Fetterman was off the trail, Oz was out and about campaigning across the state. He was in Erie, where Fetterman held his rally earlier in August. He also was in Harrisburg, that's central in the state. And then he also was on the eastern side of the state. And he's done multiple campaign stops across the state of Pennsylvania, as many as 10 counties. His campaign announced in just a matter of weeks. So he's really been going everywhere and trying to reach out to people. Something that is interesting to note is during the primary cycle, he really was touting the fact that he had the support of President Trump. It's noticeably absent from the campaign trail right now. Fetterman didn't mention President Trump on Friday. And, you know, if you look through some of the messaging from Dr. Oz, he hasn't come up. President Trump has not come up in his messaging more recently. Of course, there is the reality that when you're running for the primary, you want the endorsement of Trump. That could be a huge deal for you. But once you get to the general election, it might not be as helpful, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, where, yes, President Trump did win it in 2016, but then President Biden won it in 2020. It could be a challenge for him moving forward now that that state has actually gone blue in the last election cycle.
Just back from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Sarah Ewald-Weiss, we thank you.
Thank you.
Republicans on the House Foreign Affairs Committee are set to release a report criticizing the Biden administration's handling of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, 1 year after the fact. Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul led the investigation. McCaul pointed to a number of failures, including turning down the Taliban's offer from the U.S. military to take responsibility for securing Kabul. Speaking on Face the Nation Sunday, Congressman McCaul also cited a lack of planning as one of the biggest drivers of a chaotic withdrawal.
Well, the intelligence community got it right, so there's no failure on the intelligence side, nor the Pentagon. They called it right. The problem was the White House and State Department putting their head in the sand, not wanting to believe what they were saying, and therefore not adequately planning.
The Biden administration is circulating its own memo in response to the GOP report. That document calls the report, quote, partisan and riddled with inaccuracies. It also claims the decision to leave Afghanistan strengthened national security without hindering the country's ability to fight terrorist threats. We'll be right back. You're streaming Red and Blue on CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me! We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Lawyers for WNBA star Brittney Griner filed an appeal today against her 9-year prison sentence by a Russian court. They argue the August 4th sentencing for bringing a small amount of cannabis into Russia with criminal intent is unreasonable, and they point out similar defendants receive more moderate sentences. The U.S. State Department continues to insist Griner is unlawfully detained. Secretary of State Antony Blinken revealed in July the U.S. is actively working to bring Griner and fellow American Paul Whelan home in a prisoner exchange. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
understanding how local elections impact the entire nation by looking closely at voters' motivations. And Choices, special primary election coverage on Red and Blue, Tuesday. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's a look at the top stories we are following right now. Prosecutors say Rudy Giuliani is the target of a criminal investigation in Georgia focused on possible interference in the 2020 election. We have more details on the probe and the latest on the documents seized from Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. The FBI and Homeland Security Department are sounding the alarm over increased threats to law enforcement officials following that search at Mar-a-Lago, what federal agencies are now warning. We have an update on Salman Rushdie after he was stabbed last week before a lecture, plus why Iran says